Marzullieva, director and producer of this film, UFO Disclosure, The Coming Great Deception, and the Luciferian Endgame. I shot the footage in 2016 and we edited it and released the film in 2017. In December of that year, 2017, on Tucker Carlson's show, he had a guest on, Commander David Fravor, who was a former F-18 fighter pilot. Fravor had an encounter over the Pacific Ocean with a tic-tac shaped UFO. Tucker asked Commander David Fravor, in your own words, what do you think this was? Fravor looked right at the camera and said, whatever this was not of this earth. One. That's a groundbreaking statement. We've never heard anything like that before, especially on the mainstream media, as it were. Since then, our government has stated on the record that UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, are real. Folks, what are we to make of this? The reason I circled back and re-edited this film is I believe that disclosure is now being rolled out. We see it month after month after month. The purpose of this film is to arm you with what I believe is the truth, that these are not extraterrestrials from some other galaxy. They are in fact interdimensional entities that are messengers of deception. As you know, this film is for free. All I would ask is that you pass it forward. Share it with your loved ones, family members, your pastor. We are told, we are warned, in ancient prophetic texts, that men would faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth, that the dragon would come with all signs and lying wonders, that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. What are we to make of those statements? They are dire warnings from thousands of years ago. I truly believe we are in a window of time that is unprecedented, unlike any other time in history. We are being told by our government that the UFO or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, is actually real. That we have in our possession off-world vehicles. In my opinion, when they really show up, when there's full disclosure, everything will change. However, these are not extraterrestrials from some faraway galaxy. They are, in my opinion, interdimensional entities that have a nefarious agenda. They are messengers of deception and masters of deceit. They lie and do so habitually. And I would ask you, who is the father of lies? In this film, you will see what I believe is incontrovertible evidence that the phenomenon is not only real, but it has a very dark side, a very nefarious agenda, which is why we call it the coming great deception and the Luciferian endgame.
My name is Alan Matthews. I've seen a UFO.
I've seen a UFO.
And I saw a UFO.
A UFO.
And so we all went up to the window and we could see this giant UFO.
And saw 3 or 4 orbs that were up in the sky doing circles and erratic movements up and down in circular motion.
And all of a sudden we see this light in the sky, and I asked my husband, is that a plane? And he said, I don't think so. And so we kept watching it, and it hovered over the treetops, and you could see the flashing lights around it. It was round. See the flashing lights around it, and then you could see the windows and lights in the windows, but you couldn't see inside the windows.
And this particular night we looked over into a field and saw 3 hovering lights.
This thing was huge, and it was
Well, I didn't know until I started using the camera, but this thing was moving around and shifting and all kinds of things.
And I was driving that night. It was quite late at night, and I started to see some kind of orange, flary lights in the desert. And so I kept looking at them while I was driving, and they seemed to be jumping up and down, and there was no sound of a helicopter or a plane.
And I saw these two balls of light, these orbs, and they were perfectly round, and it was hard because it was dark to get a perspective on how far away they were, but they looked to be about 6 feet in diameter, and they were floating. To me, it looked like about 50 feet from my car.
And it kept coming closer. It was just this green or orange orb with like a red T in it. It kept coming and coming, and then it shot straight west across the Pacific Ocean.
That came forward, it just came out of nowhere, and it was a white light. And then within seconds, another one joined it above it, and then a third one joined it to the right of it. So they stayed in a triangular shape, and they hovered for a while.
It floated in a way I've never seen anything float. It didn't have a sound. It didn't have, it had no air. You couldn't hear anything like a helicopter's propellers.
My wife, I said, Jen, come out here and look at this. And that was actually before it had disappeared. So she watched it too for a few, I suppose, minute or so. And it moved around in different directions.
And the object was like hovering over the trees. It wasn't moving.
It went at an incredible speed, stopped, and then did a turn that would absolutely been impossible.
As the lights came closer and closer, it struck me that there was no sound whatsoever.
And it had different colors of lights that went all the way around it. It hovered for about 20 minutes as we watched it, and then it went down in between some mountains.
Since maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away, it was a triangle, a black triangle about like this, and it had a tail on the bottom of it with a slit in it, and I could see the clouds going past.
Al, you've had multiple experiences, and some of these experiences were very troubling to you. I want to go back to really the beginning of your life when you had your first encounter, and what was that like? What were you thinking when you saw this thing?
I was just a young guy. I was out on a hockey rink in Ottawa, middle of winter, with my twin brother and probably about 8 other kids. Beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And one of the guys looks up and says, "What's that?" We all stopped and looked up. We saw 3 UFOs, that's what we even called them back then, hovering in formation, like a triangle. The sun was beaming off these things. We looked at them and we're all like mesmerized, going, "What are those?" And all of a sudden, they moved like that in the sky, just darted and then stopped again. Everyone ran into the shack, the changing room, except for me. I stayed out on the middle of the ice and stared at these things, and I said, in my mind, I said, I need to know what these things are. Right after that, I got an angelic feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. Angelic feeling of these things, of warmth and love.
Euphoria?
Euphoria is another word you could use.
What did the craft look like?
They were like disc-shaped objects. They were all exactly the same size, color. No sound, silver with
dull silver, bright silver?
Bright silver with the sun just beaming off these things, and no sound. It was very spooky. Never seen anything like that.
How close were they to you?
I would say a mile away, because this pollution plant where they were hovering over was a mile away from the rink.
Okay, and they were right over that?
Hovering right over, maybe 100 feet up.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Now, this was the first of many experiences that would follow that.
That's correct.
And I want to sort of cut to the chase here. There was one incident and it had to do with this woman who basically changed her appearance right in front of you. Tell us about that.
That was mind-blowing. That was in 2008, September. I'll always remember that. I was working for Williams Moving and Storage for their overseas division. We had a container coming in from Kuwait. The lady's name was Diane Kelly. I met her with one of my employees. I brought him along to give a hand. He had heard all my stories. And he didn't diss me. He said, you know, I've heard strange stuff like this. My parents know about it. He didn't make fun of me or anything like that. And anyway, we met this woman. She showed up in her car. I said, hi, I'm Al. This is so-and-so. We're here to unload your container. Welcome to Canada. Shook her hand. And I noticed she was a very pretty lady, well-dressed. She was wearing the weirdest glasses I've ever seen in my life. They were just like off the charts. I'm like,
how so? What do they look like?
They were black and wrapped around. Okay. So it would cover the side of her eyes so no sun would get in.
Okay.
So I sort of figured, oh, maybe she has an eye problem or something.
Sure.
But anyway, we moved on from there. The conversation went this way. I said, for some reason, it was September, the rainy season's coming in Vancouver, and I was just making simple conversation. I said, why are you moving from Kuwait? It's so nice over there now, the war's over, and you know, you're coming back here. And she goes, she changed totally. She goes, there's gonna be another war. And for some reason I said, well, don't you believe in a higher power? I don't know why I said that, but that's what I said. And she looked at me and she goes, what do you mean, Al? UFOs? And I'm like, what?
So out of the blue, she just
said that. And I said,
and she
what?
still has the dark glasses.
Yes, that's right. I look at my other guy that's working for me, and he just sort of shrugs his shoulders. He heard her. And I go, what do you mean by that? And she goes, we were supposed to meet. I know that you know. And I go, know what? She goes, I know you've been taken by them many times, and so have I.
So let me get this straight. You've never met this woman before?
Not at all.
Not at all. She has no idea who you are.
Exactly.
I mean, she has no idea of not only does she not know who you are, but she has no access to figure out who you are.
Oh, totally, like nothing.
So she's saying something which completely startles you. Is that a fair?
My jaw dropped.
Okay.
I'm thinking, is she reading my mind? So.
But she looked human.
Totally human.
Totally human, okay.
Totally human.
At this point.
Except for those weird glasses,
okay.
But then
and
again.
And you dismissed that with the eye thing.
That's right, I'm thinking something else, right? But once she did that, I'm thinking, oh my God, here we go again. It's fast forward 2008 now when this happened, and my encounters back east that got very, very disturbing were in 1993 and 94. I got out of Ottawa, drove out from there in 2 days to Vancouver to get away from this stuff, and this is how many years later?
So you were trying to flee the experiences.
They got so traumatic back east, I had to get out of there.
Okay.
Scary, beyond scary. So then this happens, and nothing had happened after I moved out here until I met this lady.
Okay.
Yeah, that was shocking. She would do things like in the elevator going up to the floor where we're storing her furniture, she would whisper in my ear and say, they're listening. I go, who's listening?
They're listening.
They're listening. I go, who's listening? And she goes, them, you know, the Greys. She goes, they're always watching. And I told her,
you never had her. You never conversed with any of this stuff, and she's coming out and letting you know.
And starting to spook me and my other assistant.
Sure.
I said to her, I mean, that's just out of the blue to start doing this stuff. I said, look, I'm here to do a job. You're really starting to creep me out. That's the word I had to use.
And that would, I mean, it would creep anybody out. I mean, you would, you know, what's going on here? What are you talking about? This woman sounds really crazy, certifiable to say things like this.
I got the job done.
Okay.
What I did do, and I think it's human nature, I gave her my number.
Okay.
Because...
Mistake number one.
Big mistake number one, and it was just like human interest and how do you know this stuff? I need to eventually talk to you more. I gave her my number. As you said, big mistake. She phoned me up about a week later and said, oh, I'm just down the road from your place, because I told her the area where I live. And she goes, why don't you come down for a drink after work? So I said, sure. I'm with my buddy, once again, that met her the first time.
The same guy?
Yes. Okay. I said, hey, do you want to come? I'm just going to go home and clean up. And he goes, not a chance. He goes, what are you doing? Stay away from that. I said, no, I got to find out. Just my intuition, I got to find out more about this. He goes, no, I'm not going. I went. And that's when The strangest thing ever happened in my life, and I've had some strange things. I walked into their place, I buzzed up, her friend answered the door. It was her apartment, a beautiful 2-story condo right on the Fraser River, obviously in BC. And they're both out on the deck, and they have these big glasses of wine.
Now, did the friend look normal to you?
Totally normal.
Okay.
And she introduced
no sunglasses?
No, just normal.
Okay.
No sunglasses. She introduced her friend. We sat down on the deck. She's still wearing those strange glasses. Their glasses of wine are right in front of me on a table, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this massive black fly in her wine glass. And it's almost like it was stuck to the glass. It didn't make sense. It wasn't moving, and I pointed it to her. I said, "Oh, look, there's a big fly in your wine glass. I'll grab some Kleenex and get it for you." She smiled at me and she goes, "No, I'll get it." She put her finger in the wine glass. She didn't crush the fly. The fly stuck to her finger, and she put it towards her mouth and went like this. And I just looked at her and I go, "Holy smokes." So that's the starting of how strange this got, and it only got stranger. From there, she took off her glasses. She got on top of me while I was sitting in my chair, and she started lifting up my shirt. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, how old are you? You're well preserved."
Let me stop you there. So she gets up from the table, she comes up over to you, and you allow her. Now, is that like a normal reaction for you? Would you have,
no,
because you have a girlfriend at this time.
That's right.
So this is kind of weird that you're allowing her to do this.
At first, I was once again shocked. After the fly thing, she sits on me, and I realized she'd been drinking, and
so this is not typical behavior for you.
No, not at all.
Okay, so this is something normally you wouldn't allow this.
No, I figured it's because she'd been drinking, but it got a little carried away when she started asking me how old I was. And the glasses were off, as I said. She went to kiss me, and I pushed her away, and her eyes shape-shifted.
Now, when you say, what did they look like before? What are they?
Just normal. I don't know if they're brown eyes. Or they certainly weren't like blue eyes or emerald eyes. I would have noticed that right away. I think they were just normal, darker looking eyes, but the whites were white. When I pushed her back, when she went to kiss me, I pushed her back. Her eyes shape-shifted. The whites went to a golden color with black streaks, and her pupils shrunk. I upset her, and that's what happened. When I pushed her back, her eyes shape-shifted, and I pushed her off me. That was my reaction. And I said, "What the heck was that?" And she gave me the most evil laugh you've ever heard. And I got the heck out of there.
I began to think that the process of hybridization, which I had envisioned before as primarily taking sperm and eggs and then altering the embryo or the zygote, and then leading to this sort of a bell-shaped curve of part of them look alien, part of them look human, most of them look in the middle, that was probably true, but not the whole story. And then I began to realize that what they were doing is that they were adding DNA from hybrids to the sperm and egg, and they were getting a skewed bell-shaped curve that was looking more and more like humans. And if you do this enough time, you just get beings who look more and more human-like, more and more you get a refining of the species in a sense. And that apparently is what has been happening. Although how the process, I'm still a little bit unclear of the process, and there were some very pointed questions asked me about this once by a person who knew what he was talking about that I couldn't answer. And so I don't know all the medical procedures that occur here in that sense. But I do know that there is a spectrum of hybrids who look mainly alien and look mainly human, and some look really, really human. Then people would begin to describe to me how they would be taken into a room. These are abductees, and their attention would be directed to a screen-like device. They all look up at the screen, and the person will say, and I've written a couple of these kinds of events up, although I heard many of them. The person will see a picnic, for example. And at the picnic, there'll be people who are playing ball and who are grilling and who are standing around talking this and that. And they'll hear in their mind's eye, in their mind's ear, can you tell the difference between you and us? And the person will look carefully at the screen and say, no. Everybody looks the same to me, you know. And they'll say, see, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that excellent? Soon we will all be together. Soon we will be here and we will all be living together. Isn't that wonderful? Or they will see, here's another case, it's a group shot of all sorts of people, like a high school shot of the class on steps, you know, that sort of thing. And they'll say, can you pick out us among you here? And the person will look and try to figure it out and say, no, I can't. And they'll say, see, isn't that wonderful? Soon we will all be together. And I began to hear this a lot by people who were not aware of anybody else's testimony or anything like that, or, you know, who were just saying that, and who didn't really understand the meaning of what it was either. And then people would say, then these beings would tell them soon there was going to be a big change. There'll be a big change, and you're going to be a very important part of the change, and, you know, you're going to have a job to do, and you'll be very pleased to do it. And to the abductees who don't know what they're talking about. But this will happen soon. Everything's going to happen soon. It's going to be happening soon. No, that's the change. We're going to have a change. The change is coming soon. Well, I began, you know, when you hear things for the first time, you always put it on the back burner waiting for validation from other people who are unaware of the testimony. Sure. Well, so the first few times I heard this, you just blow it off. You just think, well, I'll wait. If I never hear it again, there is no change, you know. But I began to hear it over and over again from a wide variety of people. Something was happening in the future. Some change was going to happen. They had some role in the future. This was going to happen. They began to convince me, because the first time I heard it, it came out of the blue. And the second time I heard it, it came out of the blue. I mean, it sounded like I was leading them to it. I didn't even believe it had happened in the first place. So, because you have to wait for confirmation. So you don't, it's not like I'm leading people, it's like they're leading me. I instituted controls for that eventually, which I can tell you about if you want. They're kind of fun controls. But just to show you how that doesn't work the way people think it works. But the point is that after a while, I began to think, well, maybe there is going to be something happening in the future. Maybe this is leading to something. And I was realizing at this time that we're not dealing with an experiment here. That this is not a situation where people are just being put on a table and are looked at and say, what's this, what's that? And you pull off somebody's arm and look inside their body and see what's in there, you know. It's not like that. That this is, in fact, a program. And as a program, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it is goal-directed. They are doing this for a reason, and this is a global phenomenon. And the amount of time and energy and material and personnel that are involved in this program is fantastic. Unbelievable. It's literally beyond imagination. And I'm getting letters from around the world, people having these experiences, or as is Bud Hawkins and all other abduction researchers who are known. Then people began to be much more specific about what they would be doing in the future. And a lot of what they were doing was crowd control. Standing on a sidewalk saying, move along, it'll be okay, don't worry, everything is all right, just keep moving, move in this direction, move that way. And I had a whole bunch of people telling me that this is what they're going to be doing. And I'm talking to a person who has a PhD in English, telling me, well, that's what she's going to be doing. She's going to be standing on a corner directing people. And I'm talking to a person who is a junior high school, middle school dropout, telling me The same exact story. Well, they'll be standing directly, but they don't know particularly why, but they have to, this is what they know that they'll be doing. Plus a whole variety of other things. Those are just an example. So people would be saying these things like they'd be doing crowd control work, of all things to think of. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why don't they envision themselves in the future as being an ambassador? Or something that's, that would be obviously some psychological thing that they would do, which would enhance their role in this new change or whatever. But in fact, they'd be doing mundane things and helping with abductions and helping and doing this and doing that and all sorts of other things. And it was hard to imagine, but I began to realize that this was a program, if you were to believe what these beings were saying to the abductees, or then telling it to me, that this was a program of integration into the society, that they were integrating into the society and they would be looking like us, just like in science fiction. Just exactly what I don't want to hear. It goes all the way back to, if you ever think this is science fiction, or if you ever think that this is just a matter of popular culture, people are picking it up, well, this is it. But this is where the evidence led, and that is got to be emphasized. It didn't lead in 1,000 different directions, as it should have if it were psychological. It didn't lead back to the importance of the individual, as it would have in psychological cases. It didn't lead into all sorts of crazy areas. All the stories, all of them that I heard, led to one direction. And that this was, in fact, an integration program. People filling in pieces of the puzzle, and it was leading in one direction. A direction I did not like and did not want to hear. Now, the problem is this. From the beginning, from the Barney and Betty Hill case, there has been one constant among many. But the one constant I'm going to focus on now is the constant that Barney and Betty Hill said, that they made a left-hand turn down the road and then went a mile, and then they knew that they had to sort of close their eyes and go like that. In other words, they were being neurally controlled from afar. That is the case with every single abduction event ever recorded, period, that has been investigated. Now, the one exception here is Travis Walton. I'm sorry, the one exception here is the Antonio Villas-Boas case, and that was an uninvestigated case. But, and that was in 1957. But the fact is that is a constant in 100% of the abduction cases. Without that, there would be no abduction phenomenon. People would indeed reach under their pillow and get out their Magnum 45 and blow their heads off. They would call the police. They would, they would do that. They'd run, whatever it is that they would do. There would be no abduction phenomenon. So that must be, and that is in place in every single abduction. Every single one. Now, the point here is that if these beings integrate into the society who look just like you and I, they have that ability, and we do not. That makes us inferior, and it makes them superior. When you look through history and you see technologically superior people confronting tribal societies, for example, it is not the tribal societies that survive and flourish. It is the ones who have the better weapons, generally speaking. And you see the extinction of tribes throughout the world over the years. And the point is that this is one of those instances where you have a superior technologically, not necessarily physically technologically, although there is that, but biologically superior, neurologically superior, that is confronting a neurologically inferior society, and that makes this a catastrophic event. Even if it is anecdotal evidence, and I understand that this is anecdotal evidence, it's human testimony, it's human memory, the testimony retrieved through hypnosis administered by amateurs. I understand that. I understand how weak this is.
Do you ever wish you're wrong?
All the time. all the time. I went through a down period where I was very, very, very burned out, and I was very depressed over various things that had happened in my life, and I just couldn't do this research anymore. I would have sessions with people, and I dread that they would actually come over, and I'd have to do it, and all that. And this went on for a long time. And then, as I came out, I remember doing a session with somebody, and this is after I'd already done it for 15 years. And after 15 years, I remember doing the session, and I thought to myself, this really is happening. This really is happening. It's like this. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I realized that, but it's something that dawned on me again. It's so easy to think that this isn't. It's so easy to slip into this idea of, no, this can't possibly be happening. I was actually slipping into that. But this really is happening. As crazy as it sounds, as off the wall as it sounds, this really is happening. It is frightening. It's terrorizing in a sense. It is not something I ever expected to hear. I never expected to go in this direction, let alone leading people in this direction. I would like to lead them into the direction where I become the king of the world and the superior person. That would be good. But in fact, it's not. It was unimaginable to me when I started doing this research, what this was all about. Just not imaginable. I could not have ever imagined where I'd be today with this phenomenon. And I have kicked and screamed all the way through as I have slowly moved. People say, oh, well, hybrids are here, and I just blew all that stuff off. And now I think to myself, in my own research, where I can have control of it, and I know my weaknesses, and I know the weaknesses of the methodology, and I know the strengths of the methodology, I now can say to myself that this is an integration program and that hybrids will be integrating into the society and might be doing it now. And I can't get away from that. I can't rationalize that in any psychological way.
In terms of Dave's marshaling the evidence, it's all pointing in that direction. I mean, there isn't anything in it that you can read as being a divergence into, oh yes, they really want to come and learn about our computers or hear our music or become artists or who knows what, or cure cancer. We don't get that. We don't get anything that diverges from this. Yet the this that we're talking about is really a future thing which we do not understand yet fully. In human terms, anthropomorphic terms, it does look like ultimately some kind of takeover.
People come up to me at conferences and tell me stories that they've never shared with anyone else. You're about to hear one such story by a gentleman who would not come on camera, but I believe his testimony is true, which is why I included it here. He talks about deep underground military bases and military personnel working side by side with what can only be described as the Greys. Here is his testimony.
I spent 28 years working in top secret classified military intelligence operations, and one of the most honest men that I worked with, that's about 60 years old, was over my home 6 months ago and said he has a brother-in-law that works in a similar compartment of top secret classified operations, and that he actually works somewhere in the Southwest in a desert area with these aliens, because I was trying to explain to him about what I've been learning through you and through these conferences about what are these UFOs and aliens. They're really demonic angels that are coming in and out of these dimensional portals. And he actually confirmed in my home that his brother-in-law works in another area of the government that we can't talk about, but it dealt with these aliens and that he worked side by side with them.
Did he describe what they looked like to you?
No, he just told me what he has heard through his brother-in-law, who also wouldn't exaggerate or pull his chain.
Did his brother-in-law state whether he felt they were benevolent or malevolent?
We didn't get into that. He was very careful just to give me a hint
A hint.
That as I was explaining things I've learned through you and my own experiences in life, that his brother-in-law actually works with these non-human elements, entities, exactly.
And did he give you is it ongoing now? I get the impression that this was going on.
I still talk to this gentleman who retired and then came back into the world we worked in, and this stuff is continuous.
Continuing. Thank you for being bold and courageous and coming on the record.
You're welcome, sir.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
One thing I'm really curious, you've been following the whole UFO phenomena for a number of years.
Yeah.
Do you think, first of all, disclosure is imminent? And what do you think these craft are?
And it's just preparing the minds of the people. And you look at other documents, even government documents, that's their plan, is they really believe that years ago to spring this on the American people or people around the world at large, they'd freak out. And so you have to slowly, step by step, incrementally get them into that mindset. And I really think that Hollywood too is being used as that propaganda tool just to get used for that kind of a scenario. So that's the propaganda issue and the step-by-step issue. But certainly you look at some other documents and it's happening. You got, of course, the Vatican's involved in this as well, believe it or not. And also you look at, even just the recent with the WikiLeaks dump. Right smack dab in one of the emails to John Podesta was talking about imminent disclosure, again with the Vatican, working with the countries around the world for a space treaty. And this is the actual document. We're not making this up. There's no conspiracy theory here. It's right there. So imminent disclosure, I think, is ramping up. I hold to the thing that if in fact UFOs, aliens, that whole scenario is in fact going to be used as an excuse to explain away the rapture of the church, wow. We don't know the day nor the hour, but if you see the events of imminent disclosure ramping up, how much closer is that event that the church needs to be aware of? But as far as their identity, it is something that I've had a passion for, actually, even before I got saved. I've been saved 23 years at the time of this recording. But before I got saved, unfortunately, I come from a non-Christian background. I got involved into the occult and New Age, and wonder who shows up when you get involved in that stuff. It's unfortunately aliens, demons, UFOs, that whole 9 yards. And of course, the New Age instructed to channel and do that stuff and become a medium, which God forbids in the Scripture, obviously, because it's demonic. I didn't know. You couldn't have convinced me at the time. And of course, being coached at these things, you invite them to come inside you, to speak through you. Now, they wouldn't, say that, hey, we're a demon or we're some horrible, force. We're here to possess you and take you over your vocal cords. Of course not. The New Age term to seduce people is these are our space brothers.
Because there was remote viewers who were working for the government years ago who were supposed to be remote viewing like Russian spy secrets, and they, much to their surprise, ended up remote viewing some alien entities. And so that's why I think it's relevant that I mention that in my life I'd been developing my psychic ability, and I was working on doing a movie about the life of Jim Morrison from The Doors, and I, much to my surprise, ended up getting some spirit communication from Jim Morrison's spirit, I believe. And why that's relevant is that while I was exploring psychic ability in other dimensions of reality with spirits and ghosts, or call you whatever you want to call it, I stumbled upon that I could also have communication with other type of what I think is an alien energy or alien beings in a similar dimensional situation as you would with psychic ability.
They're from the star system Pleiades, or they're orbiting planet Earth. You had brought it before, and I remember coming across this in the New Age days. The Ashtar Command was
the Ashtar Command, right?
And that they're here to help us in the time of calamity. Well, we know a time of calamity is coming. The Bible calls it the 7-year tribulation, but they spin it. And they spin it and thinking that that's why they're here. They're our saviors. Jesus has got it all wrong. And oh, by the way, when you're left behind and you're in those events, it's okay. Just hang on. It's Mother Earth cleansing herself. And
tell me about your encounter. What did you see?
Well, this was before I got saved.
Okay.
And so, not so surprisingly, I had this encounter because I'm involved in the occult and New Age. I'm over there, and I'm there with my girlfriend at the time. That night, the only thing I remember was just like I hear the bang, big, loud thunder. clap. And after this whole experience was over, I remember it's like, wait a second, there's nothing on the ground. I thought it was raining. I was like, what's going on? So the next thing I know, I woke up from a dead sleep in absolute stark terror. And we're laying side by side there in the bed, and she's in front of me, and my chest is up against her back. And she said what woke her up was my chest pounding so hard.
Your heart.
She's dead asleep, but I was pounding so hard, such a physical response that.
Why were you afraid? Where was the fear coming from?
Well,
what's the source of the fear?
Well, the source of the fear was, man, there's something in this room. And I knew something was in this room.
Now you're wide awake at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
And frankly, I didn't want to open my eyes because I knew when I opened my eyes, I'm going to see something horrible. You could just sense it. And just the sensing of the fear was enough. But I went ahead and my heart's boom, boom. And now she's awake at this point, but she's still laying there too. And I'm literally, I don't know if it was paralysis or just could have very well just been, I am immobilized in fear. I didn't want to move because if you move, then they're gonna, what's gonna happen? Maybe I can just sleep it out, but no. But I opened my eyes, and her shoulder's right here. And I opened my eyes, and I saw two beady eyes staring at me. I don't remember, they were like glowing. I don't remember what color, red or green or whatever. But it was just like, oh no. And then man, my heart's really going down.
In 2016, I sat down with author-lecturer Paul McGuire, who believed, as I did even back then, that we were on the cusp of UFO disclosure. In December of 2017, that happened with Commander David Fravor on Tucker Carlson's show. Since then, there's been a steady stream of people in all forms of media talking about the validity of the UFO phenomena. Here is my interview with Paul McGuire.
I absolutely think that there's going to be disclosure in one form or another. I'm not certain about what that will be. Number one is, I think we're right on the verge. When I say on the verge, it could happen this year or next year, where the scientific community is going to make an announcement that will reverberate throughout the whole world, where they will essentially say that we now have genetic evidence that planet Earth was seeded by some kind of extraterrestrial race X amount of years ago. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Because the theory of evolution is under attack, and this still takes place somewhat under the jurisdiction of the theory of evolution. But the idea is that we were seeded by an extraterrestrial race. I think an announcement is coming soon.
Well, I certainly think a disclosure is imminent, and not just because I say so, but if you, as you've done many times and pointed out, there's all kinds of soft disclosure that's going on.
There's something definitely going on, and there's reports everywhere of sightings of different things.
And so it is, and there are many countries of the world right now that are disclosing, releasing official Ministry of Defense files. Our own Paul Hare, former Defense Minister of Canada, he's been going around Canada and the States involved with disclosure.
And you can go back to the 1980s, and they're talking about it in an imminent kind of a way. In the 1990s, they're talking about it in an imminent kind of way. It's always, we're ready to come. We're almost there.
In terms of disclosure, whether it is like a fallen angel technology disclosure, because I believe that occult technology exists, fallen angel technology exists, or whether it is a psychological, like a Project Bluebeam, where it's some kind of very sophisticated illusion. It would have to be pretty sophisticated. But we're on the verge of something, because we have geneticists saying that we've got the DNA pool of mankind has extraterrestrial DNA in it. We have this convergence of scientific information. So absolutely yes, a disclosure is coming. And with the stuff coming out of the Vatican and other sources, it could happen any year now, or any month actually.
In many ways, Al Matthews became the centerpiece of this entire film. Al had been taken, abducted numerous times throughout his life. In this following testimony, you'll hear how Al was driving home from work, and in a matter of seconds, he was switched off. Hours later, he awakened in his car, hundreds of miles from where he last remembered. These entities have a nefarious agenda. They can manipulate space, time, matter, and energy that completely defy our physics. Here is Al's testimony. Al, you had another encounter which you talked to me about last night, which was very alarming, very disturbing, where the whole entire car was taken. And I've heard stories like this from other people who have been abducted. Not only were they taken, but the entire car was taken.
That's
Tell
right.
us about that.
Yeah, and I've heard stories like that too, and I would be the last person that ever thought that would happen to me. I was driving home, the middle of summer, another beautiful, beautiful day, no clouds in the sky. I take the same exit every time. It's up in Quebec, north of Ottawa. It's called the Tanaga exit. My cottage is 5 minutes from there. Okay, I'm approaching the exit, and I drive past it with no discernment, and I feel myself, the only way I can put it is being shut off. I can feel myself slowly being shut off.
Now, you've had this experience before.
Yes.
So you know what's about to happen.
I know what's about to happen.
And you're terrified, or you're happy?
There's no reaction to me. Even missing my exit, it was nothing. That was nothing. It's just, I missed the exit, no discernment, and just being slowly shut off. And it's happened so many times, it takes 3 to 4 seconds to shut you off. That's how many times it's happened.
Wow, and then what happens?
Then what happens is, I don't know. It was hours and hours later. This was around 6 p.m. in the evening, in the summer. It doesn't get dark out till about 9:30. And the next thing I know, I'm in my car, lowered in the brightest beam of light you've ever seen in your life, the brightest, whitest light, in my car, vibrating. Just vibrating like this in this light as the car is floating down to the ground. All I see is black around me outside the light. The car, it sounds crazy, the car started itself and I'm watching it steer on these winding roads in the dark. And I'm just looking at it. It was probably maybe 10 seconds. I had a calmness come over me from being vibrating to put my hands up and start steering the car. I'm steering and I'm looking, where am I? It's pitch black out. I looked at my watch. It was 10:15. That's 4 hours of missing time. The first sign I saw was Maniwaki, 10 kilometers. That's 120K from my cottage.
So you were completely in another area.
Gone.
And what was your reaction when you realized where you were, when you were back in the car?
Absolutely traumatized. I found my way home. I went into the fetal position, crying, saying, why me? What is this? Why are you doing this to me? And I got the hell out of there. I moved.
Since you came to Jesus, has these experiences stopped?
Yes. I've had little things, what I call little things, of seeing ships. I've seen triangles, boomerangs. I've talked and counseled other abductees from my experiences, and I've noticed even one gentleman, I won't mention his name, very well spoken in the banking industry. Our encounters are almost identical. And now he's turned his life around. He thought they were aliens.
So he's come to Jesus also?
He has. He reads the Bible all the time. He's
because
a changed
he realized
person.
This is supernatural.
It's totally.
What would you say to pastors who don't want to tell their congregation about this, and yet there are people in their congregation who have seen lights in the sky, who have had encounters, maybe they've been taken like you were. What do you say to those pastors?
What would I say to them? It's time to wake up. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. This stuff is all around the world now. It's in the Bible. The warnings are in the Bible. Do not ignore them. Do the right thing. People need to know. They need to know.
They need to know.
Yeah.
What would be your closing thoughts? What would you tell someone who's been immersed in this, who's been taken several times, let's say, and believes that these entities are good, benevolent? What would you say to them?
They need to do their homework, because they're not. They're deceivers. They're compulsive liars. They're evil. There's good angels, and now I obviously know there's bad angels, and I've been helped by the good ones. And I'm not the only one. There's many people. People need to do their homework and research this stuff and realize the deception that's going on with this is off the charts.
Thanks for coming on the record.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
God bless you.
Great. God bless you too. In 2016, I went to Vancouver, Canada, and interviewed many of the people that made their way into this film. I interviewed a woman there, and her testimony was very bizarre and very strange, so I didn't use it. However, I did use it in this particular rendition of the film, and her testimony is very bizarre. What you're about to hear is unaltered, unedited in any way, shape, or form. Remember, this is 2016. And she's saying something on the record, which to me at the time sounded absolutely bizarre. But now, 5 years later, in 2021, when I heard it, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. How did she know? Is it possible that when you open yourself up to these entities, they will tell you what their agenda is? All this to say that UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. This is the coming great deception.
The powers that be on planet Earth are going to create some kind of situation, either a plague or something, where there will be mandatory vaccines, and in that vaccine, it will genetically alter the violence out of the human race. And some people think that's bad because it could also be used to control us or dumb us down, but some powers that be think they're saving the world because there's too much violence in the world. That's another story. So then I end up, I'm going in, I end up just after that, I'm traveling, videotaping some stuff, and I'm in a tent, and I wake up and I'm in a tent in the middle of the night, and I hear this sound all around me, and it's like a high-pitched sound frequency. And I get out of the tent, and it's all around me, and I see this thing, and it's like lights going around and around, this massive light thing, and it's like little tiny square windows, and they're going around like this, like, and they're lit up like this massive, huge thing. And I'm looking at this thing, it's this high-pitched sound frequency all around me, and I'm like, this is like some kind of alien spaceship or something. And then I don't remember anything after that.